On this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, the Detroit Pistons have lost 4 of their last 5 games. What in the world is going on? And does Detroit need to make a starting lineup change? JB Bickerstaff called out his starting lineup after the loss to the Celtics. Is a change coming to the starting 5? We'll talk about all that and more on this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Bleed. Let's get it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a 3, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the 3. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
And welcome to another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe. It's myself, Aaron Johnson, for a solo edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. We have a lot to talk about this week surrounding the Detroit Pistons. We're going to talk about this losing streak going on with the team. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. Those losses all coming in essentially blowout fashion. They're just not playing the same basketball that they played really throughout the first month or so of the NBA season. So we're going to talk about all of that and more. But before we do that, a word from our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. Also a word to the Palace of Pistons Substack, palaceofpistons.com. Hey, go over there. The link to the website is in the show notes. It's in the description of wherever you're watching or listening to today's show from. We've got content coming out every week on our website surrounding the Detroit Pistons, and we want you to subscribe to our website. It's completely free to you, and when you subscribe, you're going to get all of our content sent directly to your email inbox, completely 100% free of charge. So please take that 30 seconds. It really does help us out tremendously as we continue to try to grow the Palace of Pistons brand and continue to give you guys some different avenues of content coverage of the Detroit Pistons. So please go over and do that. And hey, wherever you are watching or listening from, just go hit that like button. Go hit that subscribe button. Hit the follow button, whatever it is. You're on Spotify. Go leave us that 5-star rating. Same thing with Apple Podcasts. Go leave us that rating. If all of the people that listen to us on a weekly basis just did that one thing on wherever they watch or listen from, it would help us grow so much quicker than we are already. So please take that 10, 15, 20, 25 seconds. Go leave us that rating, leave us that review, leave us that comment. Greatly appreciate your support each and every week. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this show. I want to start off with the recent performance of the Pistons. As I mentioned at the top of the show, they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. The closest loss that they've had in that stretch is that 10-point game to the Boston Celtics, where really the Pistons went down about 20 early, and Boston just kind of kept them at bay throughout the rest of the game. There was never really a point where it felt like the Pistons might actually pull that comeback off and steal a game from the reigning NBA champions. But not playing good basketball. And I'll preface this by saying we knew they were not a good team. I don't think there were many people running around before the season started saying, hey, expectations are sky high for this Detroit Pistons team. This is a potential playoff contender. You know, I think virtually everybody knew that the ceiling for this team was maybe finding themselves in the play-in picture. And to their credit, they still are in it right now. They've dropped to 11th in the Eastern Conference. There's a lot of teams that are just kind of all jumbled together in the standings right now. A lot of 9, 10-win teams, 8-win teams. So, you know, the Pistons kind of find themselves in a tier with many other teams right now, but they're not playing all that good of basketball, and their schedule upcoming gets rather tough before the end of the year. Before we get into 2025, they're going to see Boston again. They've got the Knicks who blew them out earlier this year. They have Miami who's getting better. They're playing Denver. They're going to play Phoenix. They get Sacramento. They're going to play a Lakers team in Los Angeles that's going to be desperate to get a win against a bad team with just how poorly they have been playing. So the schedule for Detroit to wrap up the annual calendar year is very difficult. And you look at how they've played as of late, and I'm wondering where everyone's at. How concerned is everyone? Because I think vibes were rather good before this recent stretch. The Pistons had won some games. They played in a lot of close games. And even though they had dropped some games that I think if you look back, you could say, hey, they should have won that one. I still think there was this sense of, hey, there's been some growth. They're getting better. They're making strides. But I'm wondering if that feeling has changed after this last 5-game stretch. You look at some of the losses that Detroit has before this stretch, and you're probably thinking, hey, now they really needed to win those games. You know, you lose to Charlotte twice where you can't close them out. They end up winning late. You lose to the Rockets in a game where the Rockets could not score the basketball, and you don't win that one. You lose another close game there. You come out completely flat at home against the Chicago Bulls, another very middling team, and you lose by 10. A game where they really trailed by more than that for most of it, it felt like. Another game where they start slow and have to try to climb their way back into it as the game goes on. So, you know, you can look at the last 5 games and say, hey, you know, they played the Bucks, they played the Celtics, they played the Grizzlies. But I don't really care because we know every night is difficult to win in the NBA. But this is why if you're a team trying to improve, trying to get better, trying to climb your way up the rankings, you have to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. So, yeah, prior to this 5-game stretch, those losses to Charlotte, the loss to Houston, the loss to Chicago, all games you could have won or should have won, and you didn't. And the Pistons have played plenty of close games this year. You know, if you're the Toronto Raptors, you're saying, hey, well, you know, the Pistons are our Charlotte Hornets. Toronto played the Pistons twice already this year. Both games were very, very close, and the Pistons ended up pulling out the wins late. But this is a Pistons team that has shown they can play good basketball. So when you come out against the Philadelphia 76ers and you lay a complete egg in a packed arena at home on a Saturday night, it's just not really all that acceptable. And I understand that game had some extreme conditions. They were on a back-to-back, had flown in, and were stuck on the airline after that Indiana game on Friday night. But, man, I still think you find a way to beat a Philadelphia team that, quite frankly, has been bad this year, that didn't have Joel Embiid, that lost Andre Drummond a minute into the game, that had, you know, virtually no center on the roster. I think you still have to find a way to win that game, even without Cade Cunningham, who got scratched 5 minutes before tip-off. So I look at the schedule. You know, they played a Orlando team without Paolo Banchero. They lost that game by 11 points. And I'm thinking, hey, I think they've lost some momentum. I really think they do. And I look at the schedule ahead of them, and I'm worried about how they finish this year. Because I'm not necessarily concerned if, they play the Celtics close and they play the Knicks close and Miami close and maybe they win one or lose all 3 of those games. In a vacuum, the one loss to 2 losses, it's not going to be the end-all be-all for this team. But they have already lost 4 of their last 5. They're clearly not trending in the right direction. And with the brutality of this schedule, they could continue to trend in a really bad direction for an extended period of time. And in the NBA, when you do that for an extended period of time and you essentially go a whole month of losing, that's how you lose guys in a season. That's how a team kind of falls apart. The sky's not falling for the Pistons yet. And if the Pistons are better than they were last year, and they clearly are, they'll find a way to win a couple of these games. You know, they do get the Jazz. They get the Kings, who have kind of been make or miss throughout the season. The Lakers are beatable. It's just you got to go do it in LA. That's not been something the Pistons do very well. You know, you also got to think, hey, they're about to be on the road right during the holiday season. Right before and after Christmas, they are on the road. And that sucks for not just a team, but for anyone, right? I mean, who wants to be traveling before, through, and after Christmas? And that's what the Pistons have to do with this loving schedule that the NBA schedule makers have awarded them. So not only are the opponents tough, but they're doing it on the road and at a tough time of the year. Like, who doesn't want to be home with their family? It's not like, hey, the Pistons got to go on the road for 2, 3, 4 games before Christmas. No, they're on the road before Christmas, and right after Christmas, they're still out west on the road. So they're going to be on the road for quite some time here. And so I'm concerned that, you know, this 4 out of the last 5 is going to turn into 8 out of the last 10 or 9 of the last 12. And it's going to continue to trend in that poor direction for Detroit. Again, a different team than last year. And maybe some of the veterans pick this team up. I mean, Tobias Harris had 27 points in that loss to the Celtics. He looks like he's maybe starting to trend in the right direction. That's the type of, you know, production that they were hoping for when they signed Tobias Harris. Not that you're going to get 25 points from him each night, but hey, it was nice that he made more than 1 or 2 3-pointers. That's something that he really hasn't been able to do this year. He made 6 against Boston. Can he start to do that a little bit more? You know, Malik Beasley's been solid all year long. He's had a couple games where he struggled, but overall his impact's been, you know, very, very high. Tim Hardaway Jr. in a bit of a slump right now. We'll talk about that in a bit. But, you know, maybe the Pistons can turn this thing around. And maybe they realize the schedule ahead of them, and that maybe motivates them a little bit more right now to pick up some immediate wins. Maybe they go out and they steal that Heat game, and then they go beat the Jazz, and they're on a 2-game winning streak before they head out west for Christmas. And so maybe you're feeling a little bit better where, hey, you know, the Knicks are playing better basketball than they were at the start of the year, but that's a game that, if things go right, the Pistons could still win. I don't think they beat Boston. Boston is on another level than most in the NBA right now, certainly the Pistons. So I don't think they win that game, but if you are a serious team and you're trying to be more competitive and learn how to win, despite all the odds being against you, despite the toughness of the schedule, being on the road, the time of year, the opponents, you find a way to win some of these games. But overall, the last 5 for Detroit have been concerning to me. That win against Indiana, a good win in the NBA Cup, I get that. But Indiana's been trending in the wrong direction all season long. So quite frankly, the Pistons should have won that game. I'm curious what everybody else thinks on this. Are we concerned about how the Pistons have performed as of late? Do we think it is going to carry on through the rest of the month? Or do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Are things going to start to turn around? You know, can JB Bickerstaff turn this little slump around and galvanize this group? Can the veterans that this team didn't have last season play a part in that as well? I'm curious what everyone thinks. Make sure to let us and me know in the comments section on YouTube. You can tweet us at Palace of Pistons. I'm at A Johnson NBA if you want to tweet me specifically, but let me know what you think about where the Pistons are at right now. Are you concerned? And let's figure out where the Pistons go from here. Speaking of where the Pistons go from here, and maybe how the Pistons don't end the 2024 calendar year on such a bad note, it might start with making a change to their starting lineup. Following the loss to the Boston Celtics on Wednesday night, JB Bickerstaff postgame talked about the need for the starting lineup to play better, specifically at the beginning of games. This is a starting lineup that has struggled. It's starting games slowly. It's not making baskets. It's not getting stops. It's not spacing the floor as it needs to. And the Pistons are falling behind game after game, digging themselves into this insurmountable hole game after game. So do the Pistons need to make a starting lineup change? I think the first guy you look at is Jalen Duren. Duren has just not had a good season, quite frankly. It's a contract year for him. He's now in, his fourth year in the league, third year in the league. And it's getting worse rather than getting better. Can't stay on the floor. He's in foul trouble. He's getting played off the floor. Whether it's, it's not all on him defensively. It's not all on him that centers are torching the Detroit Pistons night in and night out. It's definitely partially scheme related and perimeter defense related, but he's not helping himself. The film shows it. He's been a disaster defensively. Offensively, he's not as involved as he was in years past, and that's probably not the worst thing considering he's really only good as a lob threat and finishing right at the rim on dunks. He doesn't really have a back-to-the-basket game. He doesn't really have a mid-range game. He can't shoot three-pointers, doesn't have an off-the-dribble game. He tries to, but doesn't have it. And so I think the first guy you look at when you think, hey, maybe the Pistons need to make a starting lineup change is Jalen Duren. And I don't blame you. I don't think he's playing like a starting center right now. But I don't know if you want to stretch Isaiah Stewart into this 30-minute-a-night guy. And I don't know if Isaiah Stewart is even capable of it. Isaiah Stewart, for all of the issues that Jalen Duren has defending without fouling, Isaiah Stewart's in the same boat. He fouled out in 20 minutes the other night against the Milwaukee Bucks. So Isaiah Stewart's been good this year. He's been really good this year in the role that he's had. But I don't know if that's the type of guy that you need to try to stretch into a 30, 32 minute per game type of player. He's probably best in this high motor role where he's playing closer to 20, 22 minutes a night and can give you, all of his energy and use up his fouls in that time frame. But because he's going so hard, he's still going to have that super, super positive impact on the game. Elsewhere, look, Cade Cunningham's not coming out of that starting lineup. Tobias Harris is not coming out of that starting lineup. I don't think Jaden Ivey, despite kind of being a mixed bag right now, having some good games, having some games where he's not really a factor, I don't think he's coming out of the starting lineup. But I do think there's someone else that could come out, and that's Tim Hardaway Jr. Look, Tim Hardaway Jr. was really good to start the season. Good shooting, good defense, taking charges, a valuable piece in that starting lineup, despite not being the guy that I would have started at the beginning of the season. But after that head injury that he suffered against the Miami Heat in early November and coming back from that 3-4 games later, he just hasn't been the same player. He is shooting abysmally from the floor. The three-point percentage is absolutely cratered. And quite frankly, that is the most important thing that he provides at this point in his career. It's not that he doesn't try on defense. He really has played a key role for them when it comes to taking charges and gaining Detroit some extra possessions in that regard. But he's a 6'5", 6'6" shooting guard playing small forward, and he's going to lose a lot of those matchups just because of that. And when you look at what he's doing offensively in the shooting slump that he's been in since returning from injury, if you're Detroit, I think you have to look at making a change. And quite frankly, you probably should have already made the change for how long this shooting slump has gone on. It's nothing negative against Tim Hardaway Jr. because I think he's had a positive impact on the team since coming here, but he just has not been playing good basketball as of late. And I think the Pistons have a couple options that they could turn to that could maybe give them a little bit more of a boost in the starting lineup, help them start games off in a better note so that when the bench comes in, it's not a 10-point game already in the first quarter. I mean, it's like the golden rule of basketball at any level. Don't start slow. Don't spot the team you're playing 8, 10, 12, 14 points. I get in the NBA, it's a little bit different. Leads come and go, and runs are always prevalent, but it's not a good habit. And the Pistons have the habit right now of spotting these teams early in the game. So, yes, I think Malik Beasley is obviously the first name you think of when taking Tim Hardaway Jr. out of the starting lineup. And I don't blame you. He's been really good for the Pistons this season outside of a few games where just wasn't able to find the bottom of the barrel. But he's been so good overall. I mean, you think about what he's giving Detroit on the contract that he signed for in the offseason, signed a 1-year, $6 million deal. And his production has been nothing short of stellar. 15.7 points per game, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 40% from the three-point line. I mean, he's the Pistons' third leading scorer, and he's been their best three-point shooter on any sort of legitimate value. He's been not just good this year, he's been really good. He is also very clearly the veteran leader of this team. The way that he leads on the court, he leads in the locker room, and he leads overall is very, very telling. Which, by the way, side note, I saw the video online of after the loss to Milwaukee, I believe. There was a fan in the courtside club down, under, not under, I don't know necessarily how I would describe it, but back where, the players, there's a player hallway where players walk through and media walks through, outside of the court, not visible on the court. And I saw the video of a fan flipping off Malik Beasley and cussing at him as him, and I think it might have been Tim Hardaway Jr. were walking back in the hallways of the arena. And Pistons fans, just be better. Like, that's utter garbage. I don't know why there are fans that think that's appropriate. You can be upset that your team lost, but quite frankly, nobody should think that they can talk to another human that way, especially over a sports game, right? I also don't think that, you want to try a 6'5", 220-pound professional athlete. I can imagine the guy hiding behind the screen, in a barricaded room. Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., no other player would have been able to grab him if they even wanted to. So I get, you think you're tough hiding behind the screen and saying whatever you want and thinking you look like a badass in front of your other friends, but you really just make yourself look like an ass. And it's not a good look for the Pistons fan base. So, shame on that guy. Just wanted to comment on that because I thought that was really despicable, really. So just be better, I guess. I mean, and he's not a representation of the Pistons fan base whatsoever. But it's a bad look, and it was not that I expected the reaction to be anything but, this guy's a total jackass, but it was good to see everyone gang up on him because that's what's deserved in that kind of situation. He made himself look like an ass, and quite frankly, he shouldn't be allowed back in that arena for thinking he can talk to a person like that. I mean, it's not even, this guy's an athlete. You have to treat him like he's, this super special human being. It's like, dude, if you talk to anyone like that walking down the street, you deserve to get your ass handed to you. So just as simple as that. I not to go on a side tangent, but saw it and wanted to comment on it. But Malik Beasley, going back to him replacing Tim Hardaway Jr. in the starting lineup, I think it makes a ton of sense. You look at the production he's given you, he's going to help you on a nightly basis. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think you could also talk me into starting Asar Thompson. He's been a little bit shaky since returning. He's played in 5 games so far, 6 points per game, just under 42% from the field. Not incredible. But what he does give you is defense. And he gives you a little bit more athleticism. And he gives you a little bit more size and a little bit more help on the glass. And if you're not getting floor spacing from Tim Hardaway Jr. right now, which they aren't, maybe they're better off adding that defense, that athleticism, that speed to the starting lineup. At least trying it. What's it hurt right now? Tim Hardaway Jr. has just not been good enough to help this team in this last stretch. So why not try something different? And I think you'd like Asar Thompson to grow into a starting spot. And these are the guys, at least some of them, that he's going to play with down the line if he's ever in that position. So I think it might be worth a try. I don't think the Pistons are in a position where they have to commit to Tim Hardaway Jr. or commit to Asar Thompson or commit to Malik Beasley. I think they're in a position where, hey, we've lost 4 of our last 5 games. Someone's got to go out there and prove that they have earned this bump in minutes, this promotion into the starting lineup. And so it could be, hey, against Boston, hey, they've got Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. We're going to start Asar Thompson to give us some more defense against those guys and see what happens. And then maybe the next game it's Malik Beasley against Miami. Miami doesn't have 4, 6, 8 wings like Boston does, where they need to put, as many defenders on the floor against them as possible. So maybe it makes sense to go Malik Beasley that game and see if he can give you a scoring punch. Miami's not a team that, is going to drop 120, 130 points every night. If the Pistons can get out and outscore them early, that might be exactly what they need against that kind of team. So I think the Pistons have an opportunity here to try some different lineups out, try some different combinations out. And so I wouldn't be mad if either of those 2 guys got a look. I wouldn't even be mad if Simone Fontecchio got a look. I think he's been disappointing overall in the season, but I think he's really trying to burst out of the rough stretch he's been in. I think we've seen little bursts where he helps this team. And so maybe he fits better in that starting group. Maybe the Pistons try it and see what happens. I just don't think anything's off the table right now for how they're playing. I think they can try several different combinations and hope that something sticks, hope that something works. So, look, Tim Hardaway Jr. is still going to be a factor in this rotation, I think. But I wouldn't blame Detroit. And quite frankly, I think they already should have looked at adjusting their starting lineup. And I wouldn't just look at Jalen Duren, because I don't know if the answer is on the roster to start over Jalen Duren. But I do think the answer is on the roster to start over Tim Hardaway Jr. right now. So we'll see if this recent skid prompts Detroit to look at making a change. This is the healthiest that Detroit has been right now. Really only Bobby Klintman is out for this team still, and he's trending in the right direction, it sounds like. Cade missed the Indiana game. It seemed like more of a cautionary decision by the Pistons, considering they were on the second night of a back-to-back. They just got in late. Cade's back has been a problem since the Charlotte game. And then Asar Thompson didn't play on the second night of a back against Boston. But it doesn't sound like it's something where he's going to miss an extended period of time. So with a healthy roster, active bodies, I think now is the time for the Pistons to try some different things out and see what happens. Or is this just, quite frankly, an overreaction to the cold stretch that the Pistons have been going through? Are we overreacting to what happens to a lot of teams in the NBA, where they just end up going through a stretch where they're not making enough shots, they're not getting enough stops, they're playing good teams, and they're just not going to win on that given night. I mean, you look at that Milwaukee game. Milwaukee's been trending in the right direction for quite some time now. They're 9-2 in their last 11 games. They have the 2 best players in between the 2 teams. I didn't expect the Pistons to beat Milwaukee, but I do think the Pistons should have competed a lot better than they did. So it's like, are we just overreacting to that schedule? Are we overreacting to those opponents? Maybe. But I look at that Philadelphia game and I say, hey, that's not acceptable. Even if they lose that game, even if they lose it, they should not have gotten blown out at home, packed arena. No Joel Embiid. I don't think Paul George was special. Tyrese Maxey was his normal good self, but I just think they should have been in that game, quite frankly. So I don't know. I wouldn't say it's an overreaction. I don't think you can say that right now because the Pistons have not. It's not like they were on an 8-game winning streak before this, 1-4 stretch. They had dropped some games before that as well that they should have won. So I think it's very fair to be looking at making some changes to the starting lineup, to the rotation, things of that nature. I'm curious, what does everybody else think? Do we think the Pistons need to be making changes to the lineup, to the rotation? Who should be getting the promotion? Who should be getting the demotion? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I definitely want to know what everybody has to say. With that, I don't really have anything else. This was going to be a pretty light edition of the podcast. Even if Mike Anguilano had been able to join me, he's out in Cleveland right now, driving through a winter storm. So I told him, hey, I'll handle the podcast this week and we'll make it work. Hopefully we'll have Jasper back next week as well, and we can get the whole trio together for the weekly show, but didn't want to miss a week. We missed last week, and it was a combination of I had some stuff come up in the house, and it was a holiday that week, so it was just hey, let's be smart, let's take the week off, life will go on. But I didn't want to get to this week and miss 2 straight weeks. So for those of you that missed us last week, I'm sorry we didn't have a show for you. I'm glad I was able to hop on and bring a show, even a shorter, condensed show. Maybe not your guys' favorite, where it's just me rambling, just me talking. But I hope some of you at least enjoyed it. And I think we talked about the right things right now. Everyone's always telling me one way or the other, oh, you're too positive about this team. I wrote about on Wednesday how the Pistons are, quite frankly, faltering. They're playing bad basketball. And we got an email saying, oh, all you guys do is talk negatively about this team. If you're going to talk this poorly about this team, just go follow some other team. I'm not going to win everyone over. I try to talk about the good things when there are good things to talk about. I'm not going to shy away from talking about the bad things when there are bad things to talk about. That's just how it's going to go. It's never going to change. There's not going to be a world where I'm writing sunshine and rainbows about a team that has lost 5 straight games. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, this is a professional sports. These are grown men. These aren't little kids you're handing participation trophies to at the end of the season, whether they won every game or lost every game. Like, they're getting paid millions of dollars to play this sport. The least we can do is talk about it fairly and critique it fairly. You don't see me coming out here, or anyone from Palace of Pistons coming out here and taking personal shots at these athletes or these coaches. I think every time we critique someone, it's fairly. It's about what they're doing on the court. It's not about anything other than that. So I'm going to continue, and Palace of Pistons is going to continue to cover the Pistons as we always have, fairly down the line, down the middle. We'll talk about the good. We'll talk about the bad. There's no shying away from it. I don't know why you'd want to sit here and talk about a 9-15 team and just paint sunshine and rainbows about it. There are other teams across the league that have won 15 games and lost 9 games. Those are teams that you talk more positively about. They're winning more. They're doing better things. So, yeah, that's really it. I just, quite frankly, that's how it's going to be. That is going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. Again, wherever you watched or listened to today's show from, please go hit the subscribe button. Please go hit the like button. Go leave us a comment. Go leave us that 5-star review. Really, really helps us. I know I say it every week, but if you guys did it, I wouldn't have to keep saying it, right? So appreciate everyone for watching and listening to the show. We'll be back next week, hopefully with the full crew for another edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast. See you guys then.